go ahead and get started. I'll give a quick introduction. My name's Trey Rudolph. I'm one of the leaders within Eastside Change Coalition, youth-led organization on the Eastside, working to reimagine and reinvent systems of oppression. This series we've called the Decolonized Classroom. This is the first class of the series, the purpose of which, of course, is to allow local educators in the area to lead a lesson that is not Eurocentric and instead centered around the BIPOC diaspora. And today we have Damithia coming to talk to us. Quick introduction. Damithia is a dedicated practitioner. She is an educator, a tenacious advocate of self-care, community care, and disrupting dominant narratives that derail our personal growth and healing. She is a 200-hour plus registered yoga teacher, certified children's yoga teacher, and trauma-informed restorative practice facilitator. She is the founder of Thrive Yoga, a yoga and mindfulness youth empowerment organization. And Damithia is passionate about facilitating the deep healing work around race and social justice, especially as it intersects with yoga and wellness, which leads us right into our class topic for today, titled Embodied Liberation, Decolonizing from the Inside Out. So Damithia, I'll go ahead and make you a co-host, so you have the opportunity to create breakout rooms, do whatever else you need to do as host. And I think you can take it from here.
All right, thank you so much, Trey. So welcome everyone, and really cool to see some folks that are familiar names in here, and so some of this may also be familiar as we get into it. So I wanna start like I start anything that I do with just paying attention to where we are right now. And so wherever you are, whether you're seated, laying down, you might even be walking, I just invite you to take a moment to pause and kind of just bring awareness to your body and space right now. And in order to do that, you might take a moment to look around. And so if you're in a space that's familiar to you, then it may seem odd to do that, but just taking a moment to glance at your surroundings and then returning your attention to yourself. And I'm going to invite us all to take a collective inhale, so just a big breath in, and then a big breath out. And then you might do that one more time, big breath in and big breath out. And take a moment to just notice. Going to notice what's present for you in this moment. And that could be, like physically, how your body's feeling in this moment. It could be emotionally, mentally, intellectually, just kind of whatever's going on in your mind and with you right now. And taking a moment to notice how that is and maybe what your thoughts and feelings are about this class coming up that we'll be in. And you might also take a moment to visit like your feelings around this work in general. And we sort of look at like whatever comes up in a way that's just kind of open. So if you can imagine having your hand or your palm open and like whatever comes up as far as your feeling or idea of how you're doing right now, it kind of lands in your hand, and without attaching to it, like closing our hand, we keep our hand open and we like observe and acknowledge what is sitting here without really holding on to it. And so it'll take maybe a few more moments just to, again, check in with how we're feeling, notice how we're doing, what we're anticipating. And then another big breath in and out. We begin to kind of shift our awareness away from our body, away from our breath, and away from how we're doing to back to kind of like the screen or what's going to happen here in front of us. And if we could briefly check in with just like a one word of maybe how you're doing. It could be 2 words, and it might even be 3, but just a really quick acknowledgement to bring your voice into this space, but also like how you're showing up in this moment. And I'll go ahead and start with that. So again, my name is Damithia, and I am showing up feeling pretty excited. And I'm going to pass it on. If it's okay, I'll pass it to Trey, if that's all right.
Yeah, I'm Trey, and right now I feel calm. I'll pass it to Lucy.
I'm Lucy, and I'm feeling pretty open. I'll pass it to Taylor.
I'm Taylor, and I'm feeling a little sleepy. How about Josie?
Hi, I'm Josie. I'm feeling excited.
And I'm Rich, and I'm very calm and looking forward.
Oh, and we'll pass it to Terry.
Hi everyone, my name's Terry, and my feeling is turmoil right now. And I'm in my car, and so I can't see the list right now. So somebody next would go.
No worries. Can I pass it to Ileana? Is that right? Did I say that right?
Yes, I'm Eliana. I can take this off. And I'm feeling a little bit distracted, a little bit all over the place. And I'm gonna go ahead and pass it to, let's see who's on here. Kate?
Hi, I'm Kate, and I think I would have to go with excited as well. Here, I can pass it on. Has Ginger gone yet?
Hi, I'm Ginger, and I'm feeling pretty relaxed today.
Ginger, do you want to pass that?
Sure, I'll pass it to Logan. How about?
Hey, let me turn on my video. There we go. Hi, my name is Logan. I'm also feeling excited. I know everyone said that, but I'm excited.
Logan, can you pass that?
Yeah, I'll pass to Antonio.
Hi, I'm Antonio. I'm feeling contemplative. And I'll pass it to Taylor.
I've already gone. Does who has it?
So good.
Yeah.
Paige, maybe?
Or
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, I'm Paige, and like everyone, I'm also excited, but I'm also feeling pretty grateful. And let's see, who has not gone yet? Yao Yao, am I saying that right?
Yes, yeah, I'm Yao Yao. Hello. I too am feeling grateful, and I will pass it to, actually, yeah, I'll pass it to MJ.
Hi there, I just joined, so I don't know what we're doing. We're saying how we're feeling? Okay, I'm MJ, she, her. I am like mad enough to punch a wall. I hope that's an okay answer.
It is totally okay and acceptable, MJ. Do you want to, since you don't know who went, I'm going to go ahead and pass it from you. So I'm going to say, I think Ginger, you went, is that right?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
Emma still has to go.
All right, so Emma, and I think that's it.
Hi, my name is Emma, she, her pronouns, and I'm doing pretty well. So that's, yeah.
Right on. Thank you, Emma. All right, so appreciating all of your willingness to bring your voice, your name, and kind of how you're feeling into this space. And really that is sort of the first step, just as a reminder that we are all actually beings and not just brains, but we have, you know, all of this that we bring in with us. So a little bit about how this is kind of going to go. So I am a facilitator. so my job as a facilitator really is not necessarily to do a lot of lecture, but it's really to be able to guide kind of the learning and the knowledge that comes up and focus that on the topic that we have at hand. And so I do this with the understanding that while I do have information, experience, and wisdom within this, that all of you have your own information, wisdom, and experience, even if you may not have been in direct contact or education around embodied liberation or decolonizing a classroom or decolonizing education, if that makes sense. So my intent is to draw that from you and to create a experience in which you all, or we all, are learning from each other, as I do continue to learn every time that I do something like this. And so just to talk a little bit about the title of this class, Embodying Liberation, it really is exactly what that says, in that in order to liberate ourselves from systems of oppression, in order to actually be able to decolonize our systems of learning or education, we have to begin with ourselves. And because we live within this culture of various different systems of oppression, it resides within us. And so, you know, we could take this into a whole nother area of epigenetics and looking at the way that our DNA is changed through time and how ancestral trauma is sort of passed on, and those experiences are passed on into us. But really, I just want to keep it in the space that as we exist in this culture, as we walk through this culture, as we have to survive in this culture, we can't avoid, in some ways, perpetuating it and internalizing it. As much as we see kind of like what is wrong and how it needs to change, it also lives within us. Does that make sense when I say that? Okay. So this work is all about kind of like recognizing how that is, and then starting our own work around like dismantling that within us, which is long work. It's a marathon. It happens every day for probably ever, for me and for anybody else engaged in it. So we're just going to take a tiny little chunk and look at it now. So one of the challenges that really come up when we're talking about embodiment in anything is that we live in a really heady culture. We live, and as a part of the way that our culture was built, we approach learning and we approach knowledge and we approach things as verified facts, right? So a lot of what we are trying, what people are teaching, and the way that we validate learning is through like science, right? And it's all here. Like, how do I know that that's a fact? But embodiment is more fuzzy than that. It's not a binary system of right or wrong. It's really exploring kind of like the feeling within us, the sensation within us. And we have an innate understanding of what's right. Without the looking at a book or the external information about what's right and what's wrong. So because it's not written down, because it's not a right or wrong answer, it can be even that much more challenging to engage in that practice. So just a heads up for that. There can also be a lot of resistance to it because, again, we're so used to having that answer in front of us in a book. Can I look it up? Can I verify it? And if you can't, how do I know that it's right? And so we really have to begin to depend on ourselves and our own inner knowing about like, yeah, I know this because I know it. I feel it within myself kind of thing. Embodied liberation addresses the way specifically that white supremacist culture lives within ourselves. And so we're going to take a look at what we mean by that, like some of those traits of white supremacist culture. And I want to, so I want to say two things. One, I'm going to share the screen, which is a tiny little snippet of a workshop that I do. So just a few different slides of a PowerPoint. And because it's just a snippet, there's like a whole bunch of things missing. So I want to make sure that I preface this with saying that when I talk about whiteness and I talk about white supremacy culture, I'm talking about a system. I am talking about what we move through all the time. And this is not necessarily one person, right? So this is not necessarily identify as something that is attributed only to white people. This is all of us that live here and how we relate to that culture. So whiteness, culture, as we're looking at it this way. And I'm going to go ahead and share this really quickly. And I want to do this in a way that I can still see your faces because it just feels more human. So are y'all seeing that okay? Excellent. All right. So just as a general rundown, and this is a partial list, but some of the ways or the characteristics around whiteness and white culture, white supremacy characteristics are things like perfectionism, binary thinking, or either or thinking, this idea of right to comfort, this consistent and constant sense of urgency, defensiveness and denial, quantity over quality, worship of the written word. That's what I was talking about, like that headiness, that having to logify everything. Again, coming to binary systems, belief in only one right way, that something has to be it's either right or wrong, black or white. Paternalism, power hoarding, fear of open conflict. Individualism, belief that there's someone is only like the only person who can do something. Centering progress and productivity, or the idea that more is always better. And this idea that objectivity is always present or can always be present. Many of these are taken from Dismantling Racism Works, which is an amazing resource for this work, so you know. So we're just gonna look at 4 a little bit deeper, because I think that these relate really closely to education. And so some of the ways that perfectionism can show up in maybe in the classroom or even in community or groups or like anywhere. So this tendency to identify what's wrong as opposed to appreciate and name what's right. So immediately going to the thing that's wrong. Mistakes are perceived as personal and they reflect badly on the person. So when I read that, trying to relate it, you know, looking at folks who may have been involved in the criminal legal system, and yeah, they made a mistake, and like that is not necessarily the sum total of their being and their humanity, but the way that this works is that it's like you made a mistake, you do the time, or you know, you did the crime, you do the time kind of thing. Making a mistake is confused with being a mistake. Doing wrong is confused with being wrong. And it's often a thing that's internally felt. So perfectionists can often tend to underappreciate their own work and overappreciate like other people's stuff. And their inner critic can be incredibly hard. So and I'll just actually pose the question. How many of you have ever felt like you are incredibly supportive to all of your friends, but you are really, really hard on yourself? Anybody ever felt that way?
I felt
that.
Yes.
Yeah. Anybody ever have a hard time accepting compliments or like kudos on their work, but they are the first person to be like, that's amazing, you did great, this is what kind of thing to other people? Yeah, so it's really common, and no one is alone in this. Usually it shows up in lots of ways, but it's also, it's sort of just reinforced, you know, even if we want to take a step back away from trying to have this idea that somehow we can be perfect, we are constantly, as we navigate our lives, bumping into the systems that just sort of expect that from us. And if we're not doing that, then it doesn't feel like we're doing the right thing. And so this is not to say that anybody, of course, should not have this trait. It's common, and it's also really hard to get rid of. Sense of urgency. And this is one that I've had to work on personally for, I don't know, the last decade, and will continue to my whole life. And I'll say that this is for myself around this idea of like hustle, you know, like you got to do it, you got to be there, you got to make it happen, et cetera, constantly. And that ties very close into the sense of urgency that things always need to be happening. So clock time is prioritized. That speaks for itself. A continued sense of urgency that is just like present in everything, so whether that be school or work or in relationships, that it makes it difficult to be inclusive or to encourage democratic and or thoughtful decision-making practices. And so one of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons that I always try to make time to hear students' voices or hear participants' voices, whatever the form is that I'm facilitating, is because they matter, and we have to make time for that. And understanding that, of course, time is a real thing. It's a construct, and it's a real thing. And trying to move in that space and prioritizing the fact that we want to put people first, even before time. So that's one reason why I always try to do that. But also, if we think about how a sense of urgency, or always having a sense of urgency, can just make it really hard to get consensus. If I want to move really quickly through this class, or like just through my slides, like I'm prioritizing the slide, I'm not going to ask folks questions. I'm not going to wait for feedback, right? And so it's important to weigh that. You know, sometimes it's totally necessary. If I was needing an emergency surgery, I definitely don't want my doctor or the hospital to be like, well, you know, is it that big a deal? No, I want them to have a sense of urgency in taking care of me. And at the same time, if I am in a class and we are learning from each other, do we have that flexibility and the ability to pause so that we can be really inclusive of everyone? Yeah, and that takes it into devaluing relationship. And so one of the slides that is missing from this, I'm thinking, I wish I kind of brought it, but it's a long one to cover, is talking about axiology and the way that cultures value, well, the values that cultures have, essentially. And we can think about this in a way whereas, you know, a culture may value overall the collective, right? Or the culture may value the individual, or the culture could value like the immediate person right in front of me, so that interpersonal relationship. So a sense of urgency devalues that relationship, the relationship between me and the folks that are in front of me, or you know, whatever the situation may be. If we are always trying to get to the next thing, if we are always prioritizing progress, it makes it really hard to be in good and right relationship with each other. And again, supporting that quantity over quality. And we go right back to it: bigger, higher, faster, better. So, question: when folks, when someone asks you, kind of like, how was your weekend, or how was your day, how many of you respond with the things that you did, as opposed to how you're feeling? Same.
I do that.
Yeah, and I do too. And we've kind of been taught to do that. Or, you know, when we're meeting someone for the first time, and this may apply more for folks who are already working, it's like, what do you do? And usually people immediately go to work, like, how am I being productive? How am I doing something in this world in that way, as opposed to like that other work that you do with relationships or family and things like that, right? Yeah. So progressing, meaning attaining more of something, and this can, and again, in a whole nother conversation, this can be directly tied into toxic capitalism and the way that it's the object or the work and the productivity that is valued over the person, and why we continue to have so many folks struggling just to make ends meet, because people are not recognizing that it's not about that bottom line, but it's about people, or should be about people. It is about the bottom line, but it shouldn't be. Again, quantity over quality. And this note in here, how many children are served. So I'll just note on that really quickly. Like, I work a lot with essentially, you know, schools and other nonprofit organizations. And oftentimes when we have a, you know, some sort of reporting, it is usually a number. of how many people did we serve, how many kids. Now, while that number can be important for some reasons, oftentimes it's not going to tell you the whole story. And it's kind of a superficial, surfactant way of looking at things, to have just more of something. And I don't know that that needs much more explanation. Yeah, productivity and upward mobility closely tied to personal worth. And I think that's huge. I think that just along the same lines as like when we introduce ourselves to somebody and it's about kind of what we do in that way of productivity, if we're not being productive, what does that say about ourselves? Does that mean that we can take a break without feeling bad about it? Does that mean that we can do a little bit less work because we know that we need that for our own mental health and well-being without it affecting our self-esteem? Yeah, so when we tie our worth to progress and constant productivity, that's kind of what happens, is we don't take care of ourselves. And we don't feel okay about taking care of ourselves. We have to sort of learn to do that in a different way. Yeah, C also talks of capitalism. So I already said that. And last but not least, silencing and avoiding conflict. So this is also nothing new. You'll see at the bottom it says C, Seattle, because Seattle is known for being incredibly progressive and also historically not necessarily making any major moves and shifting the way, the boat, rocking the boat a whole lot, which keeps us perpetually in the same place, but in a nice and friendly way. So denying experiences of someone and or demanding them to be qualified. When an issue is raised that causes discomfort, the response is to blame the person raising the issue rather than to address what is. Politeness and niceness is prioritized and enforced, and it's prioritized over really reality sometimes. You know, I see a lot of this around we call it tone policing or whatever, but people having an issue with the way that people protest, and there's no right way to protest, right? You can't show up with your signs because there's a problem with that. You can't make noise. You can't, it's trying to keep everything nice and tidy and quiet with the appearance that it's all okay, and still do something like acknowledging a problem, but yeah, so politeness and niceness being prioritized is not helping anybody. And equating the raising of difficult issues with being unprofessional, rude, aggressive, and otherwise out of line. Again, that comes back to like, how do we protest? How do we speak up? How do we make change? How do we acknowledge that there's a problem in a way that is going to be heard if folks are constantly pushing against just the act of even speaking up and speaking out? And so I wanted to take the time to cover those things. So sense of urgency, perfectionism, silencing and avoiding conflict, and more, bigger, higher, faster, better. I'm just going to say prioritizing productivity. And so the question, I'm going to stop sharing now, that I'm going to post, I think I'm going to do a breakout with like maybe 2 groups. I think that'll work. So the question is, what are some of the ways that you have seen this either A, show up in, it could be a classroom setting, or with yourself in relationship with other folks? And it's your choice on how you kind of want to bring that into the space that y'all are in. So I think everyone will kind of get about 1.5 to 2 minutes to maybe chime in and talk about it. And I want this to be kind of a dialogue as well. So 4 groups, Trey? Is that what you're saying? Okay, yeah, let's do that. And yeah, so that there's discussion. And so that's the first part, is asking yourselves that question. Where are we seeing perfectionism show up? Where are we seeing prioritizing productivity? Where do we see this constant sense of urgency? And where do we see silencing or avoiding conflict show up in classrooms or within ourselves? So let's see, Trey, do you need me to do that?
I can do it too.
Okay.
Just assign 4 rooms. There's going to be 3 to 4 people in each room.
Cool.
All
Thank
right,
you.
I'll create them now.
All right. And any questions before we all disappear into separate rooms?
How long did you say you want for the breakout room?
Oh, thank you. So if we've got 4 folks, let's say 8 minutes-ish.
8 minutes, okay.
Yeah, and then we'll have that like minute before we close out.
Can you run through the 4 different dimensions again?
Yeah, thank you. So we're looking at productivity, prioritizing productivity, sense of urgency, silencing and avoiding conflict, and make sure I get, oh, and perfectionism.
Cool. I'm about to open up the rooms.
All right.
Cut us.
Wait, what happened?
All right.
Oh, we're back.
So welcome back, everyone. Again, we'll just come back and maybe take a deep breath in and out. And I'd love to just offer some space to hear if anybody wants to kind of like report back around noticings in that conversation that you had in your groups. Got maybe about 5 minutes or so for that. And you can wave at me or give me a thumbs up or just unmute.
I'd like to just share that last moment of humor we had in our group as we realized like we were in the middle of this fruitful conversation and going deeper, and then there's like literally a timer that's like you have 14 seconds, 13 seconds, 12 seconds. Like, the contrast between our intention and the structure that we're in.
Thank you, MJ. Yeah, go ahead.
We approached the question as to whether we talked about brutality in the system, like that it just seemed like there was brutality put in, and like part of education seemed to be like get used to it. And then the question was, but is there value in the discipline kind of thing? And we talked about it and kind of said, nah, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
And teachers too. I mean,
yeah, it hurts everybody.
Hurts everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, that's real. It hurts everyone. Nobody is immune to it. Yeah, thank you for that insight. Appreciate that. And what else came up?
Something in, I'll go ahead, this is Trey. Something in our chat that came up was how, like, you talked about how we're always like on to the next thing and like having an urgency that like where we're at right now is not enough. And there's always like something we have to be building towards, and how like the pandemic basically shutting everything down, like really highlighted that, because there was just like this like pressure on everyone to like, especially students, college students, high school students, to like use the time to be productive, like get ahead in your work, like pick up a new extracurricular, do this, do that. Like, don't just sit on your butt and like chill out with your family for 3 months. Like, you always have to be building towards something new, which just shows that like we can't even allow ourselves to just like, when the world is literally coming to a stop, like we ourselves cannot come to a stop. Like, we set a culture that that's like not okay, and we always have to be like doing something else.
Yeah, that's a whole word. Thank you, Trey. So, if I might, how do we stop that? What did we do? Did we recognize that in the middle of us trying to learn a new language and learn how to bake sourdough bread, and then maybe step back? Or did anybody have a specific experience around that at all? and kind of recognizing that need to do stuff. I'll comment really quickly on one of my realizations that happened pretty early on, was that like nothing that has been working was really working. And it most certainly is not going to translate evenly into what's happening now and like what we're doing right now. And the second that I let go of that, it was really, it really helped to support like this idea of just openness to what is possible without having an expectation of what that might be. I don't know if anybody else had a direct, yeah, Terry?
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm just struck by is, and kind of the realization I've had in my work in this area is that like the need to build community and collective power, because the only way it's possible for us to take those like steps back and to rest when we need to rest and to do that is if like the work continues while we're resting. And there's like a lot of like inherent distrust in activist communities that like going back to that point of like, I'm the only one who can do it. But being able to actually like build that community, reach out into your sphere and really have that collective power where you know that the work continues and that you sustaining yourself is part of the work continuing is really powerful. But, like I just like, to be frank, like we need more white people doing the work, right? Because the labor has squarely been on BIPOC people's shoulders, and particularly women of color, for so long. And then, like as a white man, like I struggle with feeling like it's okay for me to take a rest because I see how much of that burden is on others. And so like the need for like really to have a collective, because like whiteness and white supremacy is not going to stop when we take a break individually. And so like as a movement, as a collective, nobody's at like, not everybody's always on break, right? Like, but allowing for people to kind of rotate in.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that, Terry. I have a friend that also does this work and calls it co-liberation and collaboration. We really have to be in community with each other always, so that we can lean on each other and that we can feel the the okayness to rest, to know kind of like what you're speaking to, that just because I've stopped doesn't mean that it's not still happening and folks they've got it from here. Open up for anyone else, maybe hear from one or two more folks if there's anything that wants to be brought into the room, and then we can kind of move into questions as well, if there are any. Yeah? Okay. So space is still open for the next little bit. I'm going to pose a question and think about it for just a moment. Actually, I shouldn't say that. I should say, can you name something from our conversation today, from what we've covered today, that was either new or of interest that you may continue to work on as we leave this space and you go on about your day and into your week and month and year, et cetera? And in that same way, if you've got something, you can raise your hand. We'll start there and kind of move around. Yeah, Josie and Rich.
Okay, so I guess in like pretty much all of my activist work that I've done, I felt very isolated in it, and like even the other people that I'm with, I don't really feel like we're really in it together, that we're kind of like, I've just happened to be working with them. And so I feel like I really need to take a step back and really just find the people who like I work well with, so that we're able to just work together and do like as much as we can, because also like one person is not as effective as like 2 people or 5 people. So yeah, I feel like I just really need to focus on that in myself.
Thank you. And what else? Logan.
So kind of bouncing off of that, one thing that came up was the idea of avoiding conflict really struck me because so many white people are silent about the BLM movement, or like they're not contributing to it. So one way I thought that I could, contribute in my own way was to talk with family and friends and like really encourage other people to get involved. So kind of like what Josie was saying. So yeah, it's one thing that I'll take away from this for sure.
Thank you, Logan. Anybody else? Yeah, Paige.
So I feel as though it's hard to pick one thing, but what definitely resonated with me was out the gate talking about the approach to learning and knowledge as verified facts, and this concept that in learning and education, even just in any kind of relationship with another person, you're supposed to be right, and it's always about being right and being able to prove what you have to say. When we talked about, or when you spoke of education, and it ends up being numbers to talk about the children, and instead of talking about the children themselves. I am currently in school getting a bachelor's in psychology and disability studies. So I have been really kind of weighing that in my mind of like having done classes on cognition, having to take statistics, and seeing how these like very Eurocentric, like progress, like factual ideas are so much of the basis of the education, as opposed to really looking at it through a lens of like wellness, I guess, questioning the system. So that really stood out to me. And I think of all of these things, I'm definitely working to go through the rest of this education with that lens, with a racial justice lens, look at what I see is failing me here, and use that to go on to be an educator and hopefully take those ideas and values to find a way to dismantle this system for children that I'm working with.
Yeah, thank you, Paige. Anyone else? Anything rumbling for anyone else?
I'm still thinking about what you just said about how the system wasn't working. I feel like we're, as the parent of a kid, like all we're thinking about right now is going back to school remote, and how is it going to be as good, and how are we going to like replicate the school experience in our home. And yeah, it's helpful to step back and think that like there's nothing about having 30 kids in a room with a teacher sitting in desks for 6 hours that's like ordained by God is the one true way to like become an adult. So that's freeing for me, and thinking that like, that shouldn't have ever been the gold standard. And hopefully we can find ways to do better.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Well, should I pass it back to you, Trey? I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you all for everything and for this conversation. And yeah.
Right. I can just bring closing. It's 2:00. We want to respect you guys' time and keep it capped at about an hour. But just as a reminder, this is an event hosted by Eastside Change Coalition. This is a series, so this is the first one of the series. We have another one tomorrow at the same time, led by another educator in the area, Jabali. He'll be teaching about the African roots of punk rock music. And then on Sunday, we also have another one at 1 p.m. led by Mahtab. She'll be leading a classroom on abolitionist teaching, which should be very interesting. So if you can't go, get a friend, recommend it to somebody else. Again, all the information is flowing through our Instagram page, which I hope is how most of you guys found out about this. And with that, can we just give a virtual round of applause for Damithia? And great job, great job.
All right.
All right,
Thank you
that's
all.
everything. Thank you for coming, you guys. Have a nice Thursday.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Same to you.
Thanks to all of you.
Thank you.
Yep. Bye now.